Foreign Minister of Kuwait and the President of Spain. This afternoon, the President just concluded a meeting that went much longer than scheduled, so my apologies for coming out here late, with a group of economists from Wall Street to talk about the state of the economy and the President's jobs and growth package that is pending on Capitol Hill. And then I have one announcement, and I'm happy to take your questions. The President will meet with President Jorge Batay of Uruguay at the White House on April 23rd, 2003. This visit provides the opportunity to deepen United States cooperation with Uruguay, a strong ally in the war on terrorism and promoting democracy and economic growth in the hemisphere. With that, I'm happy to take your questions. Ron?
Do we know from either forensic evidence or any statements by Private Lynch the identity or whether or not any of those bodies were coalition troops?
I have no information on that. Anything about that would come from the Pentagon.
And can you tell us when the President found out that there would be a mission to try to rescue her?
Yeah, let me try to walk you through a little bit about this. Yesterday, the President was informed about the successful rescue in a conversation he had with Secretary Rumsfeld shortly before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Secretary Rumsfeld informed the President of the successful rescue, and the President's reaction was, "That's great." The President had a hint of it earlier in the day, but the tactical decisions were made by General Franks and his commanders on the ground about exactly what to do and when to do it, and that's what took place. Well, I think the President had some generalized information, but again, the tactical information was the decision about what to do and when to do it was made by commanders on the ground. The President had some general awareness that something might be happening, but not the details.
Could he have told General Franks not to do it? And was the plan signed off on by him?
It's not a question of whether this is signed off on or not signed off on by the President. These are the exact types of things that commanders-in-chief entrust to their people in the field to do. That's the way the military structure works best. That's the way the President works it. So this is
a history of commanders-in-chief signing off on authorizing just this kind of mission. Literally.
The President has made it clear that he wants the commanders in the field to have the flexibility, the ability, and knowing that they'll have the backup from the White House for them to make these types of calls and these types of decisions in a way that maximizes the mission.
So whose call was it to do it, Franks or the President?
You have to ask DOD specifically which military official, but no, that's correct. Let me say this, though. The President does express to the armed forces, to all those involved, especially to the daring servicemen and who carried out, servicemen and women who helped make this happen. The President expresses to them the pride of our nation for the successful rescue, and of course he expresses the joy of our nation for the Lynch family upon her being rescued. And I do want to say it is tempered somewhat by also the fact, of course, that the President knows that we have others who are missing in action, we have others who are POW, we have others who have died, and that of course is always on the President's mind. But there's no question this is a good day, a good moment, and the President is very proud of what took place. Bill?
How is the President reacting to the stress of the war? There's an article that suggests, in quotes from his friends, that he feels he's being tested, that he feels burdened by this. How would you...
You know, I can only say that I think the people who are talking are not people who have spent much time with the President, because my read of having seen the President is the following, and I see him often. I think it's fair to say that the hardest part was the lead up to the decision to use force. I think for any commander-in-chief, for the President, for this President, that to him represented the most difficult time of deciding whether or not force must be used, knowing that it would put American men and women in harm's way. Once the decision was made, this is a President who was very comfortable, who was very steady with the decision made. And that's what I see in him. These are serious times. We are a nation at war, and the President is always cognizant of that. Tomorrow when the President goes to Camp Lejeune, he's going to meet with some families whose servicemen or women have lost their lives in Iraq. And that is something the President thinks about. But he also keeps in mind the purpose of the mission, the nature of the mission, the importance of the mission, and that's what I see in him.
Do you feel that he feels burdened and that he feels that he is being tested?
No, I really can't say that. I think when you say burdened, I don't know how to define what the word burden means. I think any time a president of the United States authorizes the use of force, when this president has authorized the use of force, he understands the serious nature of that. But when he does so because he feels so strongly and so deeply, and as he's shared with the public, the important reasons why force has to be used. The president is somebody who has set his sights on a mission and is proud of the men and women who are carrying out the mission, and he is resolved to see it through. He is comfortable with the decisions that are made, and I think that you'll see tomorrow at Camp Lejeune, it's going to be a private meeting with the families. As you know, the president does think carefully about these decisions to put people in harm's way, and he cares deeply about that.
Harry,
Helen?
has the U.S. any contact with the Iraqis or any third-party intervention to end the war?
Not that I know of. Kim?
Follow up on Ron's question. You said he had a hint of it earlier in the day and he knew something was going on. Did he know that there was a rescue mission underway to try to get one of the POWs? That they had to
I really am not going to go into any more depth than that, than what I said. Just there was, without being specific, there was some generalized information, obviously, of highly classified nature. But as far as the timing, the tactical aspects, he did not.
I'm asking, and I know it's classified, but now everyone knows that DOD received intelligence
Right.
that Jessica Lynch might be alive and that they were going to launch this special
Kim
operations
was just
mission
not
to
at
get her.
liberty to get into any more specifics about what it was that the president got hinted.
How much the president is tuned in to the daily developments on the ground. I mean, this was a big deal, obviously.
Well, obviously, I mean, when I say he's tuned in, he's tuned in. He's tuned in. The secretary informed him about it at 10:05, because that was part of the regular briefing that the president receives on all events, particularly something like this. But on many of the different events in the theater, the president is told about it. Earlier in the day, he received some generalized information about some possibilities, this possibility, and I just leave it at that.
Possibilities of what?
This possibility that of what transpired later in the day may happen.
What transpired later?
The rescue, and that was singular.
On a different subject, appropriations committees in both the House and Senate have now rejected a White House request relating to the supplemental for the $2.5 billion that would go toward reconstruction and humanitarian aid. Rejected your request that that money be controlled by the Pentagon. And instead, they're designating that it be controlled by State Department and other agencies.
Correct.
Does this mean the State Department is now going to run the reconstruction effort?
No, as part of a $74 billion appropriation bill that Congress is considering, they granted the president's request in this area for the dollar amount, but there is a difference in their committee work about exactly who should get to expend the dollar amount. So the president is pleased with the focus on the correct dollar amount in this case. We disagree with the committees about whether it should be the State Department or the Defense Department that should be authorized to expend the funds, and that is an issue that we'll take up with the House and the Senate when it comes to the floor.
But given that both committees, I mean, this is not just a partisan issue, Republicans agreed that the money should go to State Department too. How do you readjust? Does Jay Gardner, retired General Gardner, who's supposed to be running the operation, does he work for
Just
the
by
State
working,
Department now?
by working the issue when it comes to the full House and the full Senate. It was a committee that did it in the House, a committee that did it in the Senate, and of course the way the process works, it's the beginning stages of it, we'll continue to work it.
So just to clarify, the President still believes that the Pentagon should be in control of the rebuilding and humanitarian relief effort under this supplemental.
The President made the proposal to do in that manner because given the fact that the Pentagon has the security forces, the armed forces on the ground, he believes that's the most effective way to deliver the help to the Iraqi people that will be necessary for the reconstruction of Iraq. So that's why he made the proposal the way he did. He stands by it. We'll see ultimately what happens when it gets to the floor.
So is it... Iraq has a debt, an external debt of about $100 billion. It's a huge burden, obviously, even with its oil reserves, run up by Saddam Hussein, unelected dictator, building palaces and weapons. And there is...
Actually, he was elected. He had 100%, he said.
Stand corrected. There is a proposal out there that once Saddam Hussein and his regime are gone, that the people of Iraq should not be burdened with this debt, that it should be forgiven, partly to liberate them from this conduct of Saddam Hussein, and also to teach banks and corporations and countries who lent such a tyrant that kind of money a lesson not to do it in the future. Does the president have a feeling on what should be done with
I think
Iraq's
that
debt?
all of these issues are going to be the issues that are going to be part of the reconstruction effort. And these decisions will get made with the international community. Obviously, there are a number of nations who have money that is owed to them, owed by the state. The state will continue to exist. And so therefore, it is still an important issue. The people of Iraq will have a role in this as well. So I don't think anybody can tell you what the outcome will be. The one thing that is certain is Iraq is a wealthy nation. Iraq has vast resources. Iraq will have, unlike Afghanistan, for example, Iraq will have a huge financial base from within upon which to draw. And that's because of their oil wealth. And that should serve benevolent purposes in the future. It should serve peaceful purposes. It should serve trade purposes in the future, as a future also where the trade sanctions will get lifted one day.
So you aren't ruling in or out debt forgiveness? For
I'm just saying I think it's too soon for anybody to give any assurances on one way or another. As I said, state-to-state relations continue even if a regime is changed.
Can I ask a more specific question then? Does the United States know now that forces are within 15 miles, perhaps closer to Baghdad, the day after this regime falls, literally the day after, who runs the financial system in Iraq? Who runs its diplomacy? Who runs its oil fields?
Well, this will be part of the whole reconstruction effort.
We don't know
And
that yet?
well, I think when the day the Taliban fell, did we know the name of the new president of Afghanistan? No. The point is, the best way to ensure the future stability of a country is to take care first of the security matters, which is first to make certain that the regime is disarmed, to make certain that Saddam Hussein and those around him are not in power, and things will evolve, and I think things will evolve in different parts of the country at different pace. Already you're seeing some talk by the British of empowering Iraqi officials to run certain affairs in some of the areas that they have now controlled. And so, again, I think you're going to see different things, different regions of the country, but broadly, the effort is designed to make certain that security is enhanced. There will be additional handovers of roles to the Iraqi people from both within and without.
You mentioned this morning that the airline aid package on the Hill is excessive. Do you think the airlines are trying to take advantage of the government to cover up some structural problems they have?
I think that the airline industry, even prior to the war in Iraq, was beset by economic difficulties, obviously unrelated to anything happening in the war in Iraq. The taxpayers responded generously once right after September 11th in the form of loans that were available to the airlines, some of which have just this week accepted substantial loans from the taxpayers. So the airline industry has to be looked at in terms of, is there something specific that was caused as a result of this war that merits additional help from the taxpayers, or were there other conditions that existed in the marketplace that need to be considered separate and apart from the war? Some of the issues that the airline industry brought to the attention of policymakers were their fear that a war would lead to a spike up in the price of fuel oil, which is a large component of the cost that our airlines incur. Jet fuel costs have actually fallen, not risen, as was predicted. Fuel costs have fallen from $1.20 a gallon in February to just 80 cents last week. And if also in terms of passenger ridership, the airlines anticipated a 15% decline in ridership. There has indeed been a decline of 10%, not the anticipated 15%, and that's also a factor that needs to be considered. The level at which the ridership now is very similar to the level of just 1 year ago. Therefore, when the administration takes a look at the congressional committee's action to add some $3 billion to the appropriations for the airlines, the White House believes that that is excessive. Something less than that. The administration does not oppose assistance for the airlines, but clearly given the factors that have affected the airlines, such as fuel oil, and the limited impact the war has had, the administration believes that the amount that the Congress is considering now is excessive. Elizabeth?
A lot of stories that there's the White House is signaling it wants to compromise on the tax cut. What is your reaction to that? Is $550 billion acceptable to you?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Obviously, the House has passed a figure at the level that the President sought. The Senate has passed a different figure, and we believe that the President believes very strongly that the higher the number, the more jobs will be created for the American people, and therefore the President continues to think it's very important that the $726 billion figure that the President sought is the figure that is arrived at. He will continue to push for that figure. We understand that there will be a give and take process in the Congress between the House and the Senate, but the President is going to continue to push for that figure.
That isn't exactly a resounding no, we're not going to compromise.
Well, again, we understand that the President proposes, Congress disposes, but the President is continuing to push for the figure that he proposed. John?
I think the point people are trying to get at when it comes to the rescue operation is you say the President had a hint of it. Without getting into any of the classified information or operational details, that seems to suggest that the President was told in the morning at one of his earlier meetings with the National Security Team that there was some intelligence and the possibility of a rescue operation being launched. Was he also given the option to say no?
I don't think people view the President as looking at it in that way. When the President receives his briefings in the morning about here are the different possibilities of things that may take place down the road. And then later in the afternoon, down the road is traveled, and the President gets an update on the things that he talked about earlier in the day. The President has made it very clear to the commanders and to Tommy Franks that Tommy Franks makes the calls about the tactics and the timing of the operations. That is how the President thinks wars are won. The President has said repeatedly the White House will not micromanage the war. That is exactly why you have generals and admirals and experts to guide the war and run the war in the way that they believe is the best way to run it. He'll stay deeply involved. He monitors it. He asks questions about what is happening to enforce accountability, to make certain that people are doing the things that they said they were going to do. But when it comes to running the war, the President believes that it's best left in the hands of the people who are expert at running the war.
Question now on the financial issues. In the supplemental, there are a number of Republicans who are saying there is majority support for striking out the money for Turkey because of anger on the Hill about how the Turkey situation. What is the administration doing to try to keep that money in there? And to follow on Elizabeth's question, not as the White House press secretary, but as the former spokesman for the Senate Budget Committee chairman and the former spokesman for the House Ways and Means Committee chairman, how likely is it that the President will get his $700 billion?
Are you asking me as an AP writer? The land of the formers. As a former spokesman for those two entities, I think it's appropriate to buck that question to the White House press secretary, and he answered it already. So thank you for the opportunity. No, I can tell you there's a process that's underway on the Hill. We've seen this before, and the President made a proposal because he thought it was the best proposal to do the most good for the economy, and therefore he's going to continue to push the Congress to pass the proposal that he made. We will work with the Congress in that endeavor. Congress, of course, has the final word, but it will be a final word where the President's voice is heard. And on Turkey, as you know, Secretary Powell has been in Turkey meeting with Turkish officials about the ongoing bilateral relations and interests. And we will see exactly what happens on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate. We're aware that members of Congress have some strong opinions on this, but the President does think, given Turkey's economic circumstances, it is appropriate, it is the right policy for the $1 billion to be approved. Maura?
There seems to be a new big push going on towards Baghdad at the moment, and the Pentagon said today that the toughest fighting may be ahead of us still. One of the criticisms of this administration is that the rationale for the war has seemed to change over time. So, for the record, at this point, would you say how would this administration define a victory?
Well, the President has been unequivocal. He said it in a speech in Philadelphia. He's been saying it in all his remarks, and I think this is something you've heard repeatedly out of the Pentagon. This mission in Iraq is about the disarmament of the Iraqi regime. It is also about making certain that Saddam Hussein and those around him are no longer in power so they can do this again to the Iraqi people or to the world. Those are the two missions.
It has to be both things in order to be a victory, one or the other.
It always has been, and that is the purpose of the military effort.
Can you tell us what the threshold is for defense officials coming to the President and asking for some sort of fresh authorization, aside from any classified matters? Are there circumstances under which they must come to him for fresh authorization?
You know, there's really nothing that's been brought to my attention like that. What happened is here the President develops a war plan with the experts with the National Security Council, with the DOD, with the generals, with the SINC, with the Secretary of Defense. The plan is approved, and
We're going to leave Ari Fleischer at the White House for just a moment and move over to Capitol Hill, where Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld has been briefing members of Congress.
Sure, there are several ways that could happen. It depends on what takes place between now and then. It depends on what happens to the regime. It depends on the extent to which the capabilities of the Iraqi military and the regime are degraded between now and then. It depends on the conviction on the part of the Iraqi people that Saddam Hussein is definitely going to be gone, and that emboldens them. So there are lots of ways.
Mr. Secretary, can I ask you, it's supposed to be about 100 degrees in Baghdad this weekend, and its forces moved closer to the city. The concern about chemical weapons. Are you concerned about the weather and the possibility that those weapons may be used?
I looked at a range today, and it was something like 55 to 72 or something.
The troops are prepared to fight in any weather. We've talked about that before. Clearly, when they put on their chemical protective suits, it's hotter for them. But we can also fight at night. That's one of the things our forces are able to do. And we can pick and choose our times, because right now we're the militarily dominant force on the battlefield. So it'd slow you down a little bit, but it would not stop progress.
Thank you. Thank you.
Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and General Richard Myers, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, just answering a couple of reporters' questions, saying that it is, if I could discern what the first question was, saying it's hard to say when U.S. coalition forces will be in Baghdad. He said it depends on many factors, the resistance of the enemy and a number of other things. And we just heard them talking about the heat, which is increasingly becoming a factor as the forces get closer to the capital city. Very quickly, just earlier we were listening to Ari Fleischer, brief reporters at the White House, describing that the president, among other things, something we did not know, that President Bush had awareness earlier in the day yesterday that a mission might well be underway to rescue captured soldier, Private First Class Jessica Lynch. Ari Fleischer didn't want to give many more details than that, but he said the president had a generalized knowledge that this rescue effort was going to be or might be undertaken, but he went on to insist that the decisions about what to do and when to do it would be made by the commanders on the ground, by General Tommy Franks and others. And as I come back to you, Wolf, in Kuwait City, at the very end, we heard Ari Fleischer saying the mission of this war, number one, to disarm Saddam Hussein, and number two, to make sure that he's no longer in power so that he can't do to his people, what he has been doing. Wolf.
The clear-cut mission that the Bush administration has been expressing now for some time. We heard earlier today, Judy, from the president's father, the former president, George Bush, speaking to Marines and their family members at the Marine Corps Air Station in Cherry Point, North Carolina. I want our viewers to listen what the former president had to say.
I didn't know I usually, these days, the speaking role goes to one of our sons. That would be the current president of the United States. Because I can tell you that he is staying the course. He is not going to back down in terms of his responsibilities, and he's going to see this through to victory. And is he ever proud of the Marines? I'll tell you, I talk to him all the time, and he mentions the pride he has in this service, the pride he has in all of our forces serving abroad. And so you ought to know that, and you never ought to worry about the commander-in-chief kind of leaving you out to lurch there or not following through on his responsibilities, just as every Marine will follow through on his or her responsibilities now, as they have always in the past.
The former president speaking earlier today in North Carolina at the Marine Corps Air Station in Cherry Point. By the way, Judy, the current president will be in North Carolina tomorrow at Camp Lejeune. He'll be speaking to Marines as well. He'll no doubt have a very receptive audience when President Bush goes there tomorrow. A lot of visitors heading to North Carolina. Judy?
No question, and I caught the former president, the president's father, saying, I talk to him all the time, which is interesting, that the two are evidently on the phone practically daily, and if not several times a day. Coming up in a moment, the latest headlines in the war in Iraq, plus It is front-page news across the globe, but what are newspapers around the world saying about the war in Iraq? We're back in 90 seconds.
Florida's natural premium orange juice is made just from our fresh oranges, not from concentrate. We own the land, the trees, and the company. Florida's natural. It's as close to the grove as you can get.
CNN Tonight as troops gear up for the push to Baghdad, former Secretary of State Alexander Haig and more. Only on Larry King Live, CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
What we can do is talk about communication.
Be a great idea.
I do too.
I feel like we really haven't connected in a really long time. We used to go places together. We used to do things. It's just...
Okay, every time I try to do something special, all I get is garbage.
You've simply lost touch with something that was once good. You can't have it back. Here. Take this home.
Rekindle your love for the internet. Call 1-800-680-0211 and get 6 months of Earthlink dial-up for half price. You also get exclusive tools to keep the internet fun, like Pop-Up Blocker that gets rid of virtually all unwanted pop-up ads, and Spaminator, it helps reduce junk email. Guess it's no wonder we recently ranked highest for customer satisfaction among dial-up internet service providers according to J.D. Power and Associates. Call, go online, or visit one of these retailers. Get 6 months of service for half price. Why wait? Move to Earthlink.
CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Hello, everyone. I'm Heidi Collins in the CNN newsroom with a check of the headlines at this hour. U.S. troops could be in Baghdad's southern outskirts by early Thursday, according to CNN's Carl Penhall, who is embedded with U.S. Army forces near the capital. Military officials tell Penhall U.S. forces are now about 15 miles south of Baghdad's southern edge. An official with the International Red Cross says a Baghdad maternity hospital suffered minor damage today from a nearby bomb blast. Iraqi officials said the U.S. had bombed the hospital, but the Red Cross says damage was minor and no one was injured. Iraqi President Saddam Hussein made another appearance today on Iraqi TV, but it is not clear when the tape was made. In the video, the Iraqi leader appears with a group of government ministers, and a new statement attributed to Saddam Hussein urges the people of Iraq to fight on. That statement, read on Iraqi TV, says victory is at hand. Secretary of State Colin Powell met today with the Prime Minister of Serbia in Belgrade. He said the U.S. is pleased with the Serb government's commitment to reform. Powell began his European trip in Turkey. He is due in Brussels tomorrow for meetings with NATO and European Union officials. It appears Wall Street likes today's news from the battlefront. We're moments away from the closing bell. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrials are up more than 200 points. The NASDAQ jumped nearly 50 points. A live report from Wall Street is just minutes away. Meanwhile, concerns about a mysterious flu-like illness are growing as the illness keeps spreading. Today, the World Health Organization is advising travelers to avoid Hong Kong and a province in southern China. SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, has killed dozens of people around the world, most of them in Asia. So far, there are no SARS-related deaths confirmed in the United States. Those are the headlines for now. CNN's coverage of the war in Iraq continues right now.
Target Baghdad. The push to the capital is on.
The speed of the push to Baghdad seems to have gathered pace. In fact, it's going much faster than many of the U.S. commanders on the ground predicted.
A dramatic rescue. Now a once-missing soldier is safe, and her family is grateful.
They went in, executed it, and came out with my sister safe and sound, so I give them great thanks.
Cheers. In the heart of Iraq, coalition forces finally get the welcome they were hoping for. CNN Live this hour, Judy Woodruff reports from Washington with correspondents from around the world. A special edition of Inside Politics. The war in Iraq starts right now.
Thank you for joining us. As you heard live on CNN a short time ago, White House spokesman Ari Fleischer said the president is happy and proud about the rescue in Iraq of missing soldier Jessica Lynch, an effort he said the president did have general knowledge about before it happened. But he also indicated that in this operation, as in others, Mr. Bush let commanders in the field make the final decisions. Lynch is due to arrive for treatment in Germany a little more than an hour from now. We'll have more on her story ahead. Plus, why are Democrats so quiet about the progress of the war? I'll ask the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Joe Biden. And military brass versus the retired generals. Our Jeff Greenfield will offer his take on the second guessing about the Iraq war plan. All that ahead, but first, let's go to Kuwait City and my colleague, Wolf Blitzer. Hello again, Wolf.
Hi, Judy. Thank you very much. As of an hour or so ago, we got a word from the battlefield that U.S. forces were just 15 miles away from the southern edge of Baghdad, and they may be even closer right now. The toughest fight, though, may lie ahead in the heart of the Iraqi capital. Pentagon sources say the first phase of the final push into Baghdad is now underway. U.S.-led forces were able to press farther north after defeating Iraqi Republican Guard units at Karbala and Qud. Our embedded reporters say the two-pronged advance appears to be moving faster than commanders expected. The Pentagon says two of the Republican Guard divisions defending Baghdad are no longer credible forces. Scenes from Najaf may also be bolstering the troops' spirits. Iraqis who initially were cautious when U.S. forces arrived in Najaf ended up cheering them on, shaking their hands, and patting their backs. The U.S. Army 7th Cavalry is in the forefront of U.S. troops since they first left Kuwait and crossed directly into the Iraqi desert. Our Walter Rogers is embedded with the unit's 3rd Squadron, which is leading the 3rd Infantry Division's march toward the Iraqi capital.
Throughout the day, as the U.S. Army 7th Cavalry punched northward in the general direction of Baghdad, we have seen huge convoys of supply troops moving ever northward. Indeed, all the arrows on the Army's map seem to be pointing in the direction of the southern suburbs of Baghdad. Earlier in the day, the 1st Brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division took Karbala with a minimum of fight, and then the 3rd Brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division secured the town of Karbala. Additionally, the 7th Cavalry has pushed onward in the general direction of Baghdad. Yesterday, we were about 50 miles from the southern suburbs of Baghdad. We have perhaps halved that distance. Throughout the day, we have watched the 3rd Infantry Division bring in prisoners of war, Iraqi soldiers glad the war is over for them, perhaps 100 at a time. There were times when the 7th Cavalry itself got into some skirmishes as it pushed forward again in the direction of Baghdad. There was a bit of a firefight when the 7th Cavalry came upon 3 Soviet vintage 20-millimeter anti-aircraft guns, ACAC guns. The Iraqi unit in possession of those guns fired mortars in the direction of the 7th Cavalry. The Apache troop opened its tank guns, opened its own mortars, decimated that unit, put it out of existence, and probably killed some 20 Iraqis in the process. This as it continues to push ever closer towards the southern suburbs of Baghdad. Walter Rogers, CNN, with the U.S. 7th Cavalry in the Iraqi desert.
And it's a similar story from CNN's Carl Penhall, who's now just miles from the southern outskirts of the Iraqi capital. He's embedded with the U.S. Army's 11th Attack Helicopter Regiment. Here's his report, just filed a few minutes ago.
The speed of the push to Baghdad seems to have gathered pace overnight and in the course of this morning. In fact, is going much faster than many of the U.S. commanders on the ground predicted.
The intensity is very quick moving, very fluid battle. The armor and mechanized infantry and artillery pieces and personnel on the ground are moving at rapid speeds.
Overnight and early this morning, the tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles of the 3rd Infantry Division, backed by the Apache attack helicopters of the 11th Aviation Regiment, punched through the Republican Guard defenses in and around Karbala. They were then able to advance far north of that city, and as we speak, U.S. commanders tell me that elements of the 3rd Infantry Division are now literally just a few miles from Baghdad.
That's CNN's Carl Penhall with the very latest from the battlefront. Let's get an update now on casualties in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Military officials say 39 Americans have been killed in combat, 9 more by friendly fire or in accidents. Britain reports 6 of its troops have been killed by combat, 19 more in non-hostile action, and 2 deaths have not been classified. Iraq does not report on its military casualties, but Iraqi officials say 420 civilians have been killed and about 4,000 injured. U.S. Central Command says 4,500 Iraqis have been taken prisoner. 7 Americans remain prisoners of war in Iraq, and 15 Americans are listed as missing in action, 1 less than yesterday after that dramatic rescue of Private First Class Jessica Lynch. Judy, in the next hour on our special Wolf Blitzer reports, I'm going to be speaking live to her older brother who's in the Army, her younger sister who wants to be in the Army, just around the same time as Jessica is going to be arriving at Ramstein, the air base in Germany, for some serious medical treatment. That's all coming up on our special edition of Wolf Blitzer reports at the top of the hour. Judy, back to you.
All right, Wolf, and we will be watching. Thanks very much. Well, at the Pentagon briefing this afternoon, officials describing several units of the Republican Guard as effectively no longer being a credible fighting force. Let's get the very latest from the Pentagon for the overall war picture as they see it. Our Jamie McIntyre, our senior military affairs correspondent, is with us now. Hello again, Jamie.
Well, Judy, the Pentagon is beginning to see some positive signs that it hadn't seen for a while. First of all, as we saw just a few moments ago on CNN, the pictures of some of the actual happy Iraqi citizens welcoming U.S. troops, that taking place in Najaf. Also, the Pentagon is seeing lighter than expected resistance, indicating at least that they may have really seriously degraded those Republican Guard divisions before the U.S. troops arrived, both in Karbala and also in Al-Qaeda. They met lighter than expected resistance. But the Pentagon officials stressed that as they close in on Baghdad, this becomes the real dangerous part as they enter that so-called red zone where Saddam Hussein is believed to have given his commanders authority to use chemical weapons, and that use of chemical weapons remains a real fear at the Pentagon.
We are not expecting to drive into Baghdad suddenly and seize it in a coup de main or anything like that. So in regard to that, we are paying great attention to their ability to defend on the ground. They may just suddenly be effective on the ground. Additionally, their ability to use chemical and biological weapons, they've proven it historically. We believe they have the capability now. Clearly, as we threaten the core of the regime, which Baghdad and Tikrit represent, we believe that the likelihood of them using those weapons goes up.
Now, in less than 24 hours, the U.S. 101st Airborne Division has driven Iraqi Fedayeen fighters from the key city of Najaf, pushed north in a several-pronged attack. The Army's 3rd Infantry has punched through Karbala, meeting only light resistance from the Medina Republican Guard and moving along Highway 9 within 25 miles of Baghdad. At the same time, the Marines from the 1st Division have secured a key Tigris River crossing near Al-Qaeda and reported to have essentially destroyed the combat fighting ability of that light infantry Baghdad division that was supposed to be providing defense down there. At the U.S. Central Command briefing this morning at the forward headquarters in Doha, Qatar, General Vincent Brooks said that the U.S. would be continuing to approach Baghdad. He said, quote, "The dagger is clearly pointed at the heart of the regime now, and it will remain pointed at it," he said, "until the regime is gone." Judy?
Jamie, these descriptions of the weakening of the Republican Guard begin to bring back memories of the first Gulf War 12 years ago. Is there a chance that coalition forces could at this point be overestimating the strength of what's left of the opposition?
Well, they might be, and that might be a good thing. They're taking it very cautiously. No one, again, they stress the most dangerous part of this could be ahead. Could be urban combat, could involve chemical weapons, could be the most loyal fighters left as they draw into Baghdad. Could be a very dangerous time. They also are careful to point out that even while they say that a division has been destroyed, they don't mean every single person has been killed, simply that its combat effectiveness has been eliminated. Judy?
And we noticed they said they did not want to use the word destroyed. In fact, they said let others do that. Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. A rescued American prisoner of war, Jessica Lynch, is expected to arrive at Ramstein Air Base in Germany just about an hour from now. CNN will have live coverage of her arrival. Lynch was rescued in a daring raid by U.S. forces on the Saddam Hospital in Nasiriyah. This Nightscope video shows troops carrying the 19-year-old Army private to a Black Hawk helicopter. We know, though, that 11 bodies were also recovered in this operation, and military officials say they are working now to identify them. When she's in Germany, Lynch will be treated for bullet wounds and for broken bones. She is reported to be in stable condition. She and more than a dozen other members of her Army maintenance unit were ambushed near Nasiriyah more than a week ago. Meantime, in Palestine, West Virginia, there is a lot of joy over the news of Jessica Lynch's rescue. Her father, mother, and other family members say they never gave up hope, despite their fears of what might have happened. And they say they are grateful to her rescuers.
I can't really say how the military is functioning over there right now because I'm not there. But you know, they're doing their job, and you know, I don't know the thoughts of the soldiers, what they're doing. The men and women that went in that building and brought her out, they're heroes in my book.
West Virginia's United States Senator Robert Byrd is also praising the rescue.
She was rescued in a daring effort by the brave Army Rangers and Navy SEALs. And today, she is safe. Safe. Safe, once again. Her state of West Virginia is relieved. Her community is exuberant. Her family is overjoyed. I spoke with Jessica Lynch's father last evening and shared with him our thoughts and good wishes.
Senator Byrd called the rescue miraculous. We'll have more on the march toward Baghdad after a quick break. We preview the potential battles ahead and the strategies in play when we check in with our military analyst.
Moving freely makes my spirits soar.
Flexium works two ways. Patented SAMe helps ease pain from everyday activities. Plus, glucosamine helps renew cartilage. You can feel results in as little as 2 weeks. Feel the Flexium difference, guaranteed.
Where do you get your pet's flea, tick, and heartworm medications?
Oh, what a hassle. I take the dog, drive to the vet's office, then sit and wait.
I just call 1-800-PET-MEDS, and my pet's medications are delivered right to my door.
Wow, I paid a lot at the vet's office.
And I paid a lot less.
1-800-PET-MEDS guarantees the lowest price on all your pet's medications. Order now and receive free shipping.
You decided. Once again, CNN is #1 for trust and experience. Americans choose CNN as the most credible news source. CNN is the most trusted name in news.
U.S. forces moving ever closer to Baghdad, but military officials say they are not counting on capitulation. For a look at what might lie ahead for U.S. forces, let's turn to our Miles O'Brien in Atlanta. Miles.
Thank you very much, Judy. And to help guide us through all this discussion about red zones and daggers and exactly what is the strength of the Republican Guard, we turn to Colonel Patrick Lang. He's retired with the United States Army. He spent some time in the Defense Intelligence Agency, among other things. Colonel, good to have you with us.
You're welcome.
What do you suppose right now would be the governor on the forward advance? Is it the Republican Guard or is it the U.S. and coalition supply lines, or both?
Well, they're close enough up to Baghdad now so that the supply line issue is probably not a big one since they had time to restock fuel and food and ammunition. So probably the main thing is combing through the rubble that the Air Force has left of these Republican Guard divisions to make sure there are no strong points that you leave behind that could threaten your lines of supply once you get past. Once they're satisfied they're through all that, I would imagine there'll be a pause while they start to reconnoiter into Baghdad, probing hard to see how much resistance there really is.
All right.
And
Well, let me ask you that. First of all, I wanted to just tell viewers where we just took our satellite imagery. This is that Karbala area, which is about 50 miles from Baghdad. Baghdad is roughly in that direction from there. We know that the Vanguard is supposedly as close as 15 miles. One of the next key points along the way here is Saddam International Airport. Do you suppose that is a key target right now?
Oh, I'm sure it is. I mean, a feature of that importance would always be something you'd want to hold, and besides, as soon as you get control of it, you'll be able to start using it for air operations. They'll put a survey team in there as soon as it's secure, and then start using it for helicopter operations, haul forward some big bladders of fuel to refuel helicopters and rearm them and things like that. And if the front stabilizes between there and the downtown Baghdad, they'll start using it for fixed-wing aircraft as well.
Now, as you go from Saddam International Airport into town, you see there's some big, wide, divided highways there. Control of these highways will be crucial, won't it?
Yeah, these are the high-speed approaches into the heart of the city, and armored forces like the 3rd Mechanized Infantry Division just love high-speed approaches. They will try to go down those things, cutting the city up into sectors as best they can, and then work on the specific sectors of the city that they think are key terrain. I would think probably various utilities, as well as major government buildings that they need to control to set up a new government.
It's a big city, about the size of Philadelphia or thereabouts. Some have said Chicago is a good analogy. It's a tremendous amount of force needed to control a city of that size, or am I wrong?
Well, it depends on the attitude of the populace, which is not clear yet. If the population, in fact, or at least a big part of them, like the Shia half of the population, if they want to be liberated, then you can control them with a fairly small force. If, in fact, a lot of people in the city don't want to be liberated, and that's always, you're never going to know that until you try, then you're going to need a much larger force, and we might end up waiting for a couple of weeks for reinforcements.
Based on what you've seen thus far, what is your sense of that? The Shias are a bit gun-shy, if you will, in the south because of what happened in 1991. They rose up, didn't get American support. Do you suppose it'll be a different story in Baghdad? Is there a lot of latent hatred for Saddam Hussein that will come out?
Yes, there is, but these folks are going to be mighty cautious. They have a long history of being kicked around by the Sunni Arab population of central Iraq, and they don't have any particular reason to trust us so far. So they'll wait and see what happens. It's the other people in the city you have to worry about, who are ethnically much the same as the Saddam Hussein regime, and their behavior right now is unpredictable.
Colonel Patrick Lang, retired United States Army, thanks for your insights. A man who's been to Baghdad many times and can tell us with great knowledge exactly what it's going to be like to fight on those avenues in that sprawling city of Baghdad. Judy?
It always helps, Miles, to hear a voice of experience. Thank you, and thanks to Colonel Lang. When we come back, hopes rising among investors. That means stocks were up today on Wall Street as they look at the progress of the war in Iraq. We're going to check in with Rhonda Schaffler at the Stock Exchange in just a moment.
CNN's continuing coverage of the war in Iraq. The latest on the war from the Pentagon. U.S. forces in the desert could soon call home for free.
Yeah, man, I'm out, man. We're gonna leave right now.
An update on the daring rescue of Army Private Jessica Lynch. Her journey home begins. These stories and more throughout the afternoon. Stay with CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Academy Award-winning director James Cameron is about to change the way you watch movies forever with a 3D real-life journey back to the Titanic. On April 11th, prepare for an unscripted, groundbreaking, historic motion picture event. Ghosts of the Abyss, an immersive 3D adventure. Rated G. Advance tickets now on sale. Call 1-888-DISNEY-6.
CNN puts you alongside the troops with soldiers.
Bang, boom, boom, and then there came small arms fire.
With sailors.
6 U.S. Navy warships were involved in the Tomahawk strikes.
With airmen.
There goes a plane taking off now.
With Marines.
What they want to do is try to take this facility intact.
Plus, CNN joins forces with top news organizations and our network of affiliates to put more reporters in the region to keep you informed. No one gets you closer than CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Well, it certainly appears that Wall Street liked the news today from the battlefront. Our Rhonda Schaffler joins us live from the New York Stock Exchange with an eye on the war and the economy. Rhonda, they were looking up today.
Yes, Judy, a huge rally here. And remember, investors in the market offer immediate feedback to the latest war developments. And today's headlines did spark a powerful rally as U.S. and allied troops zeroed in on Baghdad. The advance fueled hopes that a resolution of this conflict is drawing nearer. On top of that, there was a surge in overseas markets, a drop in oil prices once again, now below $29 a barrel, and strength in the U.S. dollar. All of this unleashing the bulls here on Wall Street. Dow surging 215 points, or 2 2/3%. The Dow is now back above its level when the war began, and the NASDAQ rallied 3.5%. A swift resolution to the war would help ease uncertainty that's plagued the market and the economy. It could open the door to better corporate profits, more consumer spending, and possibly boost job creation. That's the very latest from Wall Street. Back to you, Judy.
Thanks, Rhonda. Coming up, we're getting an update across the board on war developments and other headlines this hour, plus progress reports on the air and ground wars across the desert of Iraq.
The year's most entertaining movie.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Is now the year's most triumphant movie.
Damn right!
Chicago is the winner of 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture of the Year.
You couldn't buy that kind of publicity.
Critics cheer. It's brilliant.
Yes!
Exhilarating. An absolute sensation.
Oh!
You can watch it over and over. That's Chicago. Chicago, rated PG-13. Now playing everywhere. You decided. Once again, CNN is #1. For trust and experience, Americans choose CNN as the most credible news source. More than MSNBC or Fox News. More than any network, newspaper, or magazine. CNN is the most trusted name in news.
For more on the war in Iraq, log on to CNN.com. Get reports from the front lines.
Huge explosions.
And all the facts and features you need to track the war. Plus, sign up for breaking news alerts and be the first to know. Log on and stay informed at CNN.com.
As coalition forces push ahead in their march toward Baghdad, they have encountered some resistance in the Shiite holy city of Karbala. But American troops and their superior technology have turned out to be a key factor in the fighting there. And to the south, British forces continue their attacks on targets around Basra. ITN correspondent Tim Ewart reports.
These are soldiers of the U.S. 3rd Infantry fighting near Karbala, southwest of Baghdad. They're facing Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard, his finest soldiers. But for all the resistance, coalition aircraft rule the skies, and coalition technology is overwhelmingly superior. U.S. commanders believe the Republican Guard is a doomed force.
We will approach Baghdad. The dagger is clearly pointed at the heart of the regime right now and will remain pointed at it until the regime is gone.
To the south, more black smoke over the town of Basra. British troops control the outskirts of the town and today destroyed another building they said housed Iraqi fighters. There is much fear here of the Saddam loyalists who still hold sway in Basra and of the invading troops waiting at the gates. The Americans are racing towards Baghdad. The British still seem anxious to make their progress here as measured as possible. Basra will fall, but there may first be fighting in the capital, 250 miles to the north. Tim Ewart, ITV News, Southern Iraq.
From the south to the north, in the rolling hills of northern Iraq, coalition airstrikes targeted Iraqi positions today in what's been called a ferocious bombardment. It happened outside the oil-rich city of Kirkuk. CNN's Brent Sadler is there.
A back road leading to Kirkuk, the heartland of northern Iraq's oil wealth.
a road that's now in the hands of Iraqi Kurdish forces. Occupying these positions, straddled along a crescent-shaped front line east of Kirkuk. This land fell into Iraqi Kurdish hands without a shot being fired. Iraqi soldiers fled these positions in a hurry, under the onslaught of coalition bombing. This is the end of the road for Kurdish forces manning this remote checkpoint. But with special permission, they let us through. We are now between the lines, a no man's land of abandoned Iraqi bunkers and an unnerving silence broken by the roar of warplanes and the distant thud of airstrikes. This territory is within easy artillery range of Saddam Hussein's forces encircling Kirkuk. The oil capital of northern Iraq is visible behind me just over there. A harmless flare of burning gases is easily identifiable. Iraq's precious oil fields remain intact. Also intact, Kirkuk's defences in the distant haze. Iraq's armed opposition, including these Kurds, waits on the sidelines to join the fray, if America asks.
This is about freedom for Iraqis. This is about the liberation of Iraq, and we Iraqis must shoulder the responsibility of helping in the process of liberation.
And, says the Iraqi opposition, in winning this war. Brent Sadler, CNN, near Kirkuk in northern Iraq.
Hello, everyone. I'm Heidi Collins in the CNN newsroom with a look at the headlines this hour. It is about 1:30 a.m. in Baghdad, and U.S.-led forces reportedly are 15 miles from the southern edge of the Iraqi capital, maybe even a little closer now. Pentagon sources say, barring unforeseen circumstances, there will be no let-up in what they are calling the first phase of the final push to Baghdad. A warning today from the United Nations about humanitarian efforts in Iraq. The UN says food rations being handed out by coalition forces are wrapped in the same color as a small bomb currently being dropped in Iraq. They say children could confuse the two, and that could be deadly. Rescued American prisoner of war Jessica Lynch is expected to arrive at Ramstein Air Base in Germany less than an hour from now. She will be transferred to a hospital to be treated for bullet wounds and broken bones. Lynch was rescued from a hospital in Nasiriyah, Iraq, in a U.S. military operation led by special forces. The 19-year-old Army private was captured during an ambush more than 1 week ago. A boat that might be a hijacked Cuban ferry is drifting in international waters about 60 miles off Key West. That word from a police spokesman there. A federal law enforcement source tells CNN there are 2 armed individuals and 23 other people on board. The police spokesman has said the group includes women and children. Coming up next hour, what happens next after this intense 24 hours of fighting? The very latest on where U.S.-led forces are, where the Iraqis are, and how the assault on Baghdad might develop from here with our military analyst, General Dan Kreisman. Hear from the family of former POW Private First Class Jessica Lynch on her dramatic rescue and celebrations back home. And from the family of Shoshana Johnson, the U.S. Army specialist who's still listed as a POW. And from the ranks of the wounded, why a Marine gunnery sergeant who's fought in both Gulf Wars says there's no comparison between them. CNN's coverage of the war in Iraq continues right now.
With U.S. forces rolling closer and closer to Baghdad, the military seems to be zeroing in on the ground war. But as it has from the beginning, air power remains an important part of the battle. Let's check in with CNN's Gary Tuckman at an air base near Iraq. Gary, you've seen it firsthand from the first moments.
Well, that's right, Judy. And 2 weeks after the air war began, there is no let-up and no effective response from the Iraqis. According to the Air Force, at any given time, there are more than 200 coalition aircraft either over Iraq, flying to Iraq, or flying from Iraq. We come to you from a base near the Iraqi border. Many of the pilots are flying these A-10 attack planes behind me. They also fly F-16s. There are also Marine F-A-18s and Marine Harriers at this base. We can tell you that a lot of the pilots at this base are not flying to another base in Iraq. It's a base that was taken over by the coalition last week, and we spent part of the day at that base. And when you arrive there, you're greeted, in a sense, by Saddam Hussein.
This is Talil, Iraq, the Talil Air Base, but there are no more Iraqis here. The coalition took over this base last week. It's now a major staging point, and you know you're in Iraq when you drive down the road coming into the base and you see the portrait of Saddam Hussein. What's happened is the military personnel who've arrived here have taken out their markers and are writing messages on Saddam Hussein's portrait. You can see the main one here on the bottom, and also here messages like, "We won, April 1st, 2003. I want to give you a look. There's a lot of security personnel here. You can look over there and you can see the military vehicles. These are Air Force security forces with their rifles patrolling the entrance. There is a lot of fighting in this area. We're near the town of Nasiriyah, but this base now is considered secure enough to make it a major staging point for the coalition.
Now, a short time ago, we talked to a pilot at this base who's been to that Iraqi base, and he too says he has signed that mural right on Saddam Hussein's sash. After he told us that, we asked him during his missions, and he's flown about 30 in the last 2 weeks, we've asked him, does he still have any artillery being fired at him?
And yesterday I was up just south of Baghdad by 30 miles, and we were fighting SA-2s and SA-6s and AAA on the ground, so it's still out there. But the air power and the air package that we take to the fight, we continue to be very effective, and we attrit the Medina forces down to less than 50%. And when we put our power punch to them and then the Army and the Marines move forward, it's a very effective, coordinated effort.
Lieutenant Colonel Webb is telling us he has a mission this very evening. We want to tell you the Air Force has just informed us that between this morning and tomorrow morning, it will fly 1,900 sorties into Iraq, a total over the last 2 weeks now of close to 24,000 sorties. Before we go, one more thing we want to tell you about superstitions. Military people are very superstitious, like many of us are. Here at this particular base, they get their MREs. Their MREs are their meals ready to eat. They come in a bag, and when you get an MRE, you get your meal, and you get a little treat with it. What a lot of people here at this base do, when their treat happens to be this one, and this is the candy called Charms, many of the people here refuse to eat their Charms. They consider it a good luck charm to keep their Charms in their clothes and not eat them. So, one little superstitious tale for you, Judy. Back to you.
Well, I'm one of those who thinks that we need to pay